I don't know what to check out.
Yeah, what's
Okay.
going on?
Hello. Why don't we,
So she is in it. She's going to do.
she's gonna have this.
Has she gone? Send it to Julie. She knows that I think she's she's getting over to there and we not. And then I said, oh no.
At 6:30, I. Kids from theater.
That's
It's my couple night.
It's a tech night.
It's a tech night, so I gotta-
Get later.
How are you? Like that.
Maybe it's back today. So.
I know, I was. I know, you do Tuesday, and at first I was like, no, and then I realized. No,
me too, my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah, nice tomorrow, just drop by.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Everybody
great, I just want to make.
ready? We're live streaming. Can we just do a quick crew check-in again, like name and, just to get human for a sec, we just check in on like, what fun Valentine's Day things do you want to remember when you were a kid to stress out about in your classroom? Or 3 you have going on in your family, like fun traditions or those sorts of things. Is that okay? We started that and then let's approve our work today and some sort of an agenda. I know we've got Christy here for half an hour. So let's just keep that in mind. If we maximize our time, okay? I'm superintendent, when I had 3 sisters when we were really little, 1 year we had no play, so my parents for Valentine's Day, we made this big cutout heart, and he said, a forever gift of a gigantic Hershey's bar, my dad wanted to tell me to put it on, whatever. And I swear to God, it's been 40 years and they still bring the damn thing out, and I'm like, we said forever, and we'll just like, oh my gosh, so I have to figure out how that's cute. To them, that's my stressor for Valentine's Day. Because Amazon won't be sent like 1 bar. Somebody, so I literally have to buy it, but.
Autumn Rivera, Bone Springs Middle School. I'm a middle school teacher in Belmont. So it is very interesting. The bigger the better, and there's always kids just walk, like, then they have to carry it with them all day, so they have like the teddy bear and the like Cheetos and roses and around, so. My favorite memory is I had a student one time have a boy give her a giant teddy bear and she like freaked out and like take it and gave it to me, so I still pull it out every time. I can't handle it. So if you're bored, come on over.
I'm Stephanie West. I teach kindergarten at Soapers, and on the opposite end of the spectrum for Valentine's Day, where this is their first big experience, and there's this sweetness of it. I can read it by myself, and there's the naughtiness of how many pieces of candy can I shove in my mouth until the West knows that I did it, and then peeling them off the ceiling the rest of the day. I just love that it's a Friday this year, and I get to go home for 2 days before I get them back. That's right, 3 days. That's even lovely. That is my happy.
My name's Hannah Asher. I'm 4th grade at Riverview. My favorite part was always the shoe boxes that you did make. And my biggest stress there as a teacher is the shoe box. Making sure, hey, you gotta bring your shoe boxes in, we're gonna color, we're gonna decorate. It's love all my teachers to do that, because I will cancel that, not to it.
Hi, Sophie Helm, program manager for the Family Resource Center, and I was gonna do the same thing, making the box that you take your Valentine's box. Love it. I think that was my favorite part of elementary school.
Nancy Bieber, I'm. Right.
She's not a data person.
She's not a data person. I really don't have memories of Valentine's Day when I was younger because it was a long time. But my very favorite thing was when my girls would make their Valentine's Day boxes. And I would come home with all those little
cards and they were so special and I loved it.
I'm Stacy King, the preschool director at Homewood Elementary. I would say the boxes as well. That's always a fun memory, but for preschool, you know, they don't quite get it yet, but they just know that it's a fun day. We have a little party and do all the things, but we have them decorate little bags. It's fun.
It was definitely the boxes, and I used to, look to see if I was gonna get any of the Valentines from the cute little boys in the class. I had a crush on. I was like, oh, and then I would get it, I would be like, oh. So that was one of my, fond memories of that, and the little candies, you know, like little lines and stuff, and what you get, and that kind of thing. And then but for today, now it's a good reminder that my husband's birthday is coming up, so. So I'm always grateful for that reminder.
Begonia Platt, Chief Human Resources. Similar to Anna, now I have somewhat of a tradition in my household. My husband is big into motorcycles. 2 or 3 years ago, he ended up buying one in Valentine's. I called it my gift. I've never been on the thing. I've never touched the thing. It's definitely not my motorcycle, but it's my motorcycle for Valentine's. And actually, a few days ago, he just texted me, what motorcycle do you want this year? Now I know why, and I found something massive and pink. Okay, you're gonna ask, fine, I want that motorcycle. That I'm not gonna get, I already got a motorcycle for Valentine's. We have that story now to share.
Hi, everyone, Jasmine Ramirez, school board VP. Valentine's tradition, my parents were really big on giving us cards. And so I've done that with my kids. Both my kids get a really cute card and it's like a, for their keepsake kind of thing. And we don't really do, buying candy and stuff, although we have candy at the house all the time, but. We would take the kids to a movie. Well, so that's nothing. Suzanne Fitzgerald, from Bridges High School.
It's a favorite memory as well, like when my daughter in elementary school, so thank you, elementary school teachers. Would make just these like little cute things, and she was always just so excited to give me the I love you mom thing that was like written in Sharpie on a rock, you know, it was like, with a gem on it. And I'm like, yes, like I still have one in my drawer, it's like a piece of marble written in Sharpie. I love you mom. Yeah. And so now I feel different for Valentine's Day, so it's not as stressful, it's kind of a non-thing at Bridges, but at my house we'll make brownies and cookies.
Unless they have boyfriend and girlfriend, then it's different.
We're just not, we're not doing that.
You're not. Good luck with that.
So I got the rock. No stress there yet.
3 years, I just say, Kayla Rose, assistant principal at Lower Springs High School, 1976, Glowwood Elementary, Mrs. Anthony. And she taught us how to make flowers out of tissue papers. And a kid made a wagon wheel, or a covered wagon for his Valentine's. I have never forgotten that. And now my son was my oldest, who's almost 30, was home this weekend. He was telling his friend how they go skiing Saturday and how wonderful it is that I still give my Valentine's cards my way. I gotta go to Jordan. Sunday after Pilates, before he heads out to get one in the mail to Boston. We'll get there, because I was like, oh, do I do that? And I saw her, she gets us Easter, she gets us all these cards, Halloween, I was like.
Great.
Adult children.
Heather Fox, assistant principal at Cardinal School. Many years ago, I decided I could not do holiday cards in December. And we switched to Valentine's. So our tradition is we send Valentine cards. In December.
Yeah.
It's like, I never done that. It's fun. It works, it's much more calm. Yeah.
Having a with you, introduce yourself at any like Valentine's celebration or tradition or memory.
Oh, okay.
Catherine Bloomberg, I'm on the board of ed, sorry, it's the last meeting. I am a preschool teacher, so we do a lot of fun Valentine's stuff. We did cutting hearts today, folding paper in half, which is actually one of my favorite, and practicing our scissors. And with my own kids, we hand make Valentines for their classes still, which is very messy, but very fun. Lots of doilies, and I did it with my grandma growing up, and so I wanted my kids to do the same. My son only has 4 done, I think, so far this year, but the girls are done.
Okay, so there is an agenda link to our invite and wanna see if this works for everybody for today. And you can see up at the top, again, I just copied forward the resources that we've been using as a reference. The purpose of this team is that we will align on recommendations to Board of Education regarding health insurance benefit plans for next school year. Again, if we could look at this agenda, what I was thinking was that we could take, again, we've got Christy for about another 15 minutes, so wanted to see if there are clarifying questions that she could help clear up from the budget summit, if there's any specifics, right? This team kind of did some work. We thought we had some alignment on what our interests were, and then felt like we should pause because the budget's on. So wondering if we wanna start with any questions for Christy on that, and then updates from Christy on, I think, the 25-26 forecast, just and I think some of the things lately that we've been working on. I have some just general updates for this team on some of the regional work, and then it feels like the real conversation we need to have is if there are implications from the budget summit and updates to this team's work and kind of where we land. And when we're gonna find next steps. Does that sound right for us as a team? Why don't, I was gonna pull it up, but I'll really quick just link into the budget, like the slide deck, so that folks have questions, like. You know, our work paused because the information we wanted to make sure everybody understood about 24, 25, 25, 26. So just wanna make sure we're all on the same page with where we are, our proposals, I'll link that in there. If anybody has anything burning right now, but let's start with that. And then. Other updates and context.
We don't have a lot of updates from the summit information, just so that you guys are aware, that we're providing, information for RNA. That is the similarity to the summit is just, it's almost exactly the same. We finished quarterly financial reports, that we'll be putting out. I have a couple of questions I'm still digging into. Our salaries are still running ahead of 50% you would estimate for the middle of the year. That I'm looking into and some other things, but generally our quarterlies are looking pretty good based upon what we thought we were at. That was the only kind of concerning item that I really seemed to work on, but mostly I'm just trying to get the budgets out to the school.
I would say that one of the things that we're watching that's different about the 25-26 forecast, it feels a little different, and I don't know, I know Nancy, we haven't circled back on this yet, but that the student enrollment projections really matter, right? And I think we've all learned that one of the problems with the 24-25 budget is that we over projected student enrollment, so we were dealing with like what became kind of double cuts because we started really high, we were lower, and now we're projected to go lower, so we're trying to make up for that. And I think one of the things that Christy and I have been looking at is, you know, we've got agreement that we're gonna use the demographer's projections for budgeting next year. And we're concerned that they weren't conservative. I would say based on some other kind of estimations that Christy was able to run. I think we are monitoring, a lot of folks have asked about the implications of the federal actions around immigration and other things. Qualitatively, it hasn't, in fact, I'm looking at Nancy, qualitatively, we're hearing that we're not seeing what often is a January, February bump in enrollment of students coming from Central and South America. Right. Does that sound right? Like,
Absolutely, there's usually quite a large number of applications in January when we come back and we have done.
Wow, I'll say I've lost two.
And you have lost.
We lost some over Christmas.
so I think we're, like, that's just a, you know, there's no way, I don't think that the demographer could project.
Yeah.
The current administration's policy. So I think that, it's important to know that, like, we are trying to be conservative in 25-26 forecast, but we're not, I don't think we're not feeling that we were super conservative. And so I think we're bracing ourselves for, not to change the takeaway, we still believe that we don't need system-wide cuts, reductions in force, that sort of action. I think there's a lot we don't know about the current narratives in federal funding. If that comes up, we'll be finding a very different world, but I do just think that that's a context when we think of like, hey, can we shake up a little more money to help pay for additional things? I think we're feeling like we might need to shake up additional money to pay for things that we have to pay for. So I think that's, I don't know, Christy, if there's anything else to add on that, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that is, thanks for that, we still have the 4 options around the governor's request for the total program funding, which could vary 600,000. We've also got the, obviously what's going on with the federal, government with grants. There's a lot of unknowns around that. I'm just flat funding everything for right now. Just a lot of unknowns. We're still trying to figure out the budget itself for 25-26, which is just gonna take time. It's gonna take the next couple of months for us to really grapple with that and get a good handle on it. But we're working on that every day now. So there's still a lot of unknowns that make us fairly concerned, but still not working on a different model yet, but just kind of going, we gotta really watch this. So.
Any other like technical questions on the 25-26 budget or Christie questions? We can update this team that, you know, today the Aspen Parachute superintendents met with a CBT. And are all incredibly motivated to see what's possible by us working together. And we got the numbers from CDBT that organizations in the valley, including our school districts, including a lot of our towns and counties that use CDBT in this Fort Valley, saw an average, the range was 16.5 to 22% increases in rates. So that's for everybody using CDBT in this valley. So pretty substantial. And I think it, you know, we talked about that as a team of, this is bigger than us, you know, this is bigger than us. And this is, every district's feeling it. It's interesting, it feels a little like a benefits trade secret. It's not like people don't really talk about what plans they offer and what employees pay. But I do know that, not everybody is paying for 100% of employees. Like a lot of organizations using CBT in our valley are at a point where they cannot pay 100% of the employees. So it's like you opt in, like health coverage is optional, and if you choose it, even a baseline, you're paying. So just an interesting context. We have a couple next steps with that team, none of which I think just in terms of managing expectations, and this was really clear with CEBT too, that like it's unlikely, it's probably not even possible that anything that we can pull off will have an impact on 25-26, but we're thinking about 26-27 and different conversations we can have because we're working together. So nothing concrete at this moment, other than a commitment from the districts to work on this and work with CEBT on it.
So 10% increase was a deal.
It kind of was.
It's like they really did plan on us reducing our usage because once people started to have to pay, they did bake a little bit that in for 25, 26. Not that it feels that way.
Our increase from this year to next year is 10%.
Is. That's what we negotiated before they knew where the new rates were coming in, so it actually worked. That's good, finally, something.
I don't think we're easy.
Zagonia and I are gonna be meeting with them shortly to go through the renewals.
Okay. Any other questions on those updates or budget summit?
You guys, if you guys have any questions that come up, I'm sorry I can't be here the whole time, feel free to, to text me, I'll be available. And I can answer, right away for anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I ask a question about, what you just said in terms of distance not covering the full hospital insurance. Do you know any more detail about that in terms of, I'm just thinking about bottom line take home? Do you know if people are getting raises and that it's a wash and they're having to pay for health insurance, like the whole picture, because really the salary benefits is a package.
It's a package.
Yeah, so I was curious about what that might.
I don't know, Heather, it's such a good question, I mean, it's interesting, cause it's, I was even trying to figure, like. Is this something people say, cause I think a lot of our, we feel like we're competing for staff, right, with our neighbors, and there's different, right, you go to RE2, you get a 4-day school week, but you get a pay cut, but you get this, but you get that. So it's not clear, and one of the things that I think, is worth looking at is that question around competitive means what are we doing against everybody else? Yeah, I do think that, I think if we could come up with a list of questions from CEBT, like what's the average plan offer? What's the most common plans offer? What's the most, I think we could get that kind of information for the valley, for all the providers, because it's everybody, I mean. They cover, all our 4 school districts, they cover like Pitkin County, I think they cover City of Aspen, Town of Salt. They covered some of our charter schools, but a different pool, like they're in a small provider pool, that I think they said they cover 5,000 lives in the Aspen and Parachute. So all, from a bunch of different public serving organizations, so we can certainly get more data from them on like. What's the most common employee contribution? But I don't know, and I think other school districts, from what I can tell, are doing what we're doing right now, is trying to forecast our budget, trying to figure out what we've got. And I think everybody's just feeling from their health insurance right now. And just feeling like, we've seen Aspen now has they're working on some cuts and reductions, and they're frustrated because they're saying, we had hoped that the cuts and reductions were gonna go to salaries, and now they're all on health insurance, right? They're like 100% on health insurance, and so I think it's that, I'm trying to sit with that, and I don't know exactly which either districts or organizations are doing it, but CDC was saying not everybody is paying 100, like the employers are not paying 100% of a baseline plan. That's not. It's apparently it's not necessarily common. And yeah, but there might be a way that we just ask friends and colleagues,
I was gonna say,
and sometimes
we call cousins and.
yeah, and sometimes the plans are right there online.
A little bit of research.
Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't, I don't know how much it changes, but it helps us understand the landscape a little bit of what folks are dealing with.
Is it a given that I deduct that HD plan is going to be the base plan?
No,
No,
I mean, I think right now, right in the forecasted budget, that 25-26 plan that was presented in that IBB summit that'll be presented to the board and the community tomorrow. We made some assumptions and the assumptions were we're gonna keep paying 100% of the employees' costs, but we needed to go with the lowest plan because of those increases. And so we did build that forecast around paying 100%, like HDHP being the baseline. We need to hear a recommendation from this team. You know, as we talked about last week, if we decided, hey, the recommendation is really POA, we would really like to figure that out. I think I would say if that becomes the recommendation, we're gonna have to see what happens over the next 3 to 4 months on budget. And, you know, we have a list now of all the things that either we cut or programs we would like to be able to fund. And that I think that if we're able to get a 25-26 budget that has additional funding, then it's weighing. And can we get to PPOA?
I thought last time we as a group did recommend.
Yeah, I think I was just like, can we just pause and get the budget summary clear?
Right, so we
And
need to
so-
revisit it, but we did.
Yeah, and I think it felt to this through, like,
feels
Boy,
like
we gotta be able
everything
to
I'm
be
reading is the other, everything I see
Someone
talks
someone
about.
asked me that, and I said,
so that
I think this, go ahead, because I agree.
I feel like what I see, it talks about that high deductible plan as opposed to PPO
I agree.
8.
Like the stuff in the slides, all referenced.
Yeah, so that's what was
Instead of the
confusing
PPO.
to me. Yeah. And that was curious because I feel like in all the surveys that went out, that was. Nobody liked that one.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
So I just didn't know quite how that came about, if it did, which it apparently hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're at right now was struggling to see where we could cut additional, where we could get 600,000 to get to PPO8. Without having to get to kind of the systemic reductions of staffing. And yeah, so I'll stop there.
Can I ask a clarifying, I'm going to ask a question.
Oh my God, good job.
Yeah, I fixed myself.
Thank you.
I feel like when we formed this team, it was to make a recommendation for the plan. And I feel like any budgetary implications that come out of this team go back to, at least for certified, our budget subcommittee. Which I know we brought up last Thursday, like we have thoughts and ideas of where some monies could be sitting that could help with it, so. If we're all in agreement as PPO8, I feel like it goes back to the individual IBBs to start looking at some budgets too and putting more ideas and more thoughts and more brain power in the room, like Talbot will talk all the time about. You know, years ago, when we were in a recession, there was no food for adults, and how much does that save, and those kind of things, so. I don't know that it's this team's decision to figure out how to come up with the 600,000, I feel like that's the. Other subcommittees, and I don't know what admin and classified IBB have those budgetary, but it might be good if they all did.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Totally agree with Stephanie. I think that's why I was cautious to say, we were unable to uncover additional stones. And I do think there's an opportunity to kind of, I don't want to use this word wrong, but like crowdsource ideas. And so I might push back a little bit that is the job of IBB teams to tell us where to cut, but I do think there's an opportunity for our staff as a whole to brainstorm and bring forward ideas. And that then, you know, when I've talked to other districts about like, I know we talked about this a little bit, like the stop doing things crowdsourced list, like a Google form that's just like, what should we stop doing? Or what can we cut? Or where, and seeing that, you know, that what I've heard is that like 98% of what you're gonna get is just gonna be maybe a little bit crazy. But 2% is gonna be stuff you didn't see, like food for adults, which could then be very much, I do think that the food for adults is one that you know, I could guess at that, but I do think within 2 weeks, we could probably push out a quick survey to a lot of departments and say, what are you spending on food for adults? And if we cut that from your you know, if you said 4,000 a year, great, and we reduce your budget by 4,000, what does that net us? You know, and that could be, I think that that's one that absolutely we could start digging on. And so one of my wonderings was if we could, with this team, play through that idea a little bit of that, does that sound like I mean, what I'm imagining is a Google, legitimately like a Google form.
So this group morphing from the health insurance committee to now being another budget committee?
No, I don't think it's to be honest, Autumn, I think it's probably like those decisions right now of where do we cut have predominantly been left to budget managers, right? Like the reductions that we've seen in the 24, 25, 25, 26 budget came from facilities team saying, I've got 2 positions that are unfilled right now and we're just not gonna hire. We're gonna restrict that, or pushing on teams saying to all the budget managers and ECE, what could you handle a 20% reduction in your discretionary? Yep, we can do that. So I would say that my intent would be to get a bunch of ideas and pull them and then to do an initial screening that says, okay, what can, and I feel like this would be the kind of thing that I would do with not everybody, but I feel like we feel some obligation to put them in those Tuesday emails of like, okay, that form is open. We got 2 weeks, and I'm gonna in 2 weeks summarize for you what I think are the general themes, and here's some that I think we should chase down. Here's the process and timeline for that, and I think if we did something like that with the priority being to get to PPO8 and that 600,000. I don't know, I mean, what's that sound like to you all? And because I also think this could be a tool that we use every, we're gonna need it every, something like this, where we say that, hey, that stop doing things.
I guess I wonder if there's also sort of an additional caveat, note, reminder in that survey, at least this is where my brain is going, to say like, and if we don't find this, then this is gonna be the outcome, like we have to do the HDHP and then, or if we don't do the HDHP, then we're gonna have to pay for, yeah. Or you're gonna have to pay and then, cause I think that people's minds change and shift their priorities if they're like, ooh, but I thought we could do this, but now I'm seeing this and I would rather pay this than have this other thing happen. So I just don't know how to include all the caveats, like to people, like recognize that you're giving feedback and this feedback's gonna be taken seriously and prioritized. However, if we can't get to that number through these creative ideas, then we might have to do. I don't, I'm brainstorming out loud.
Yeah, no,
I think you're right, there needs to be a cause and effect.
We also have to get our budgets for each of our buildings, and we as an admin IBB are gonna go. We have to look and see, like, if we don't get 20%, what does that look like, 10%, 15%? I mean, we have to go through our budgets as well. Cause we don't spend food out of our discretionary budget, we use rental money. So you're not gonna save any from Glen Springs High School, because we just have paid for it in a different way. So I think that in and of itself is gonna be another place, we just are waiting for them to get them, then to talk about it. We're gonna really talk about it in admin IBB out on 28th. We're meeting for a half day.
So it could be something that this group right now today provides some ideas and then kind of disbands, and then we go back to our individual IBB groups and have those budget conversations. Is that?
I'm confused, I think, on the timing of all of this. I was under the impression that a group was meeting and we were gonna have some information today to kind of finalize a recommendation. So I think I totally am misunderstanding the process. I thought that the bigger IBB group was meeting with like our recommendation and the current budget. I missed that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what our goal is.
I mean,
for this meeting today.
I mean, our goal is to align on a recommendation of the Board of Ed regarding health insurance benefit plans. And I think where we're at is that this team would like PPO 8. I think the reality that you're hearing from them is like, we don't have the money for it. So then I think it's like, well, now what, so what, you know,
But
like.
we don't have any additional or new information from last week. I thought we were gonna have.
No, we
additional
were, I think we were
information.
just waiting to hear that budget summit, because we weren't sure that we were gonna
Okay.
be able to come out neutral, because there was a world in which we might have ended up saying, we're $1 million short still. And we gotta go further, and I don't know if that would have changed what our recommendation was with PPO8. It doesn't sound like the budget summit changed, I mean, I want to pressure test this, but it doesn't sound like the budget summit changed this team's hope that we can find an extra 600,000 to cover PPO8. I mean, I think, and I guess what I mean, I appreciate the questions around what are the purpose of all these teams? Because I would say that I don't know that, I think our IBB teams are a wonderful representative leadership team to help think through some of these pieces and implications. You know, I know that admin wants to look at those budgets and see, like, could we handle, you know, maybe to the point of the 600,000, could we handle a cut to discretionary? What would that impact be? But y'all need to see that first. So I understand that there's groups that could help brainstorm. I think the ultimate decider on a lot of those right now feels like that's me. I will name that, like, there are incredible limits to recommendations that say cut people. Like, one, certified, we can't. There are protections and rules around cutting certified staff. Attrition is a great way to do that, and I guarantee you that every department that's not a school that is losing people knows they're under the pressure to say, that person's leaving, do you really need to refill that position? So like, that is happening, but I don't see, and I'm very reluctant right now in February to say, hey, we're just gonna cut this department because a bunch of people said we should. That feels really inappropriate, that's not how we treat staff. And so I'm very, like, do we need to look at the size of departments and staffing and resource allocation? 100%, but that is not, I don't believe any of those kinds of conversations are gonna impact the 25-26 budget at this point. Unless something happens at the federal level and we lose 12 million, and then we're all circling up and going, what the heck are we doing? So I guess that's where I see this, and so I do think that, like, where I'm feeling we need to look for funding if we're gonna try to get to this 08, is the stone unturned, is the, like, food for adults, and then trying to, like, work through those, or if it's cutting school discretionary budgets, and you know,
Can I ask too, Anna, like, my thought is too, like, this isn't a forever. Like, a decision that's made for going into next school year, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't mean that then the next school year we couldn't figure out something different. So my thought is, like, given where we're at financially, it's like, it was made, if I remember correctly, from the summit, it was built in like a step increase plus the cost of living for classified or what, I mean, that was built in as well, which I think was something that was unexpected. At least that's the feedback I'm getting from the classified team that I've talked to. Plus, it's still trying to project no cost healthcare plan. So even though it's the high deductible one, it doesn't mean that for 26-27 school year, that's what it has to be.
correct.
So
Yeah,
could
You
it be
have
like,
reoccurring deficit coming.
We do.
It's not like it's magically will come back.
no, and I understand
Yeah.
that, but what I'm thinking is like, for timeline purposes and all the things for this school year, it's like, is it worth trying to figure out for next school year, trying to recover 600,000 to cover it? You know what I mean, for next school year? It's just my thoughts out loud too, is like, I mean, maybe it would be worth revisiting all of that the following school year to see if we could get us back up to a PPO 8.
Yeah, you're spot on, Stacey, like, you know, in the certified IBB contract, benefits are up for negotiation every year, and benefits are negotiated, health insurance benefits are negotiated through this committee, so that's why we get. Which some of you know, because you've been doing this every year, so we'll be back here doing this next year, and
CDBG is working on other options for us, so there might be other plans next year, that adjust some of our local providers or create a tier 1, tier 2 local provider. And we talked about this initially too as a team, that we really felt that often employees don't fully understand their options. And where there's like, when can you use telehealth and not have to make a copay? What is that what is that a good choice for? The surgery plus, and I'm only knowing this because in talking to Aspen and Parachute Suits today, folks were really saying like, wow, when we push people and people understand surgery plus, like, man, it saves their deductible, they're not hitting that, but a lot of people just don't understand when they have a hip or a knee or a non-emergent, they just forget, like, they just assume I'm going to Valley View to do this, that's my primary care pathway, instead of pausing and calling surgery plus and like, oh, I go to Junction, this costs me nothing, and it saves the district a ton of money. Or not the district, but my local plans. So there is this, I think there are things we could control if we lean in.
I'm gonna push back to something Gayla said that has just resonated with me so profoundly. First of all, telehealth, if you get the right doctor, can be great, but I've had numerous staff members be like, yep, called, they told me to go get a swab. So they had to go in anyway, so it's a 50-50 shot on whether you're getting helped over the phone or not. And 2, for money for it, like, if you have to take your kid in, you have to come up with that cash on that H plan. And in the environment that we're in right now, and all the new legislation and stuff, I don't feel safe putting any of our employees in a situation like that. And I don't want an employee not to take themselves or a child in because they don't have $750 to pay for strep. And right now, look at our schools, we cannot get them well because there's just this cycle and we have good health coverage at the moment. And even in the health coverage we have, which is not as detrimental as the H plan, I have a coworker who's diabetes and the amount she's paying out of pocket every month has jumped astronomically. So I have a child who is on a chronic medication and mine has more than doubled every month. So we're already essentially taking a pay cut, switching from the insurance we were to this, switching to H plan next year is taking another pay cut. And it's putting a lot of our employees in danger of being able to take care of themselves and their families.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry if this has been asked before, but I just don't have enough information or knowledge. Historically, when this conversation has happened regarding insurance, what has the commitment from the district been? Like, what have they? I don't know if Kayla.
100%, it's always been 100% in the 25 years I've been here.
For the employee.
For the employee, that's been 100%.
And the plan itself, what has that?
It's changed every year and it's always depended. I remember one year at like 17% sitting on IBB with you guys. When that 17%, we felt it. My paycheck was definitely less. We got a little bit of a raise.
It's always been a few.
Always,
years.
always been a PPO, always been a
Always.
PPO, but it went up, it can go up high a lot of
And
years.
we slowly changed, like, I think when I first started, it was like PPO 5
Yeah.
and then it's PPO
Slowly,
6. And
yeah.
now
That's
we're at PPO 8, so it's like,
17% year that.
that we had to switch up.
We
by
got a
November.
little bit of a raise, but the health insurance, it paid it, yeah.
And so
And it's-
when you're saying it costs you more, it's because you were covering more than
Family and
yourself,
spouse.
right? So
Yeah.
that's where
I-
folks that are feeling it.
Kids,
because-
750.
Okay.
So has the priority for this team been to hold the 100% or the PPO? Like,
It feels like that's what's conflicting right now.
It's both.
And I will say, like, as someone sitting on the board, hearing the recommendation of this team, but also understanding the reality of the
Yeah.
budget. That's gonna be a really tough
Yeah.
call to make, and it would be amazing if this team get an alignment. Like, on a recommendation that also encompasses the reality of the budget, cause a very real concern that I have is if. We're increasing $600,000 this year so that our baseline goes up to what was it, 2.1? What is it, 2.1? So when we're talking about a 20% increase on 2.1. That's another $420,000 in year 2. Versus a 1.5 20% increase
is a $300,000 increase in year two. So then when you're looking at year over year increases on the higher plan, are we, if we go with PPO 8 this year, are we just pushing this conversation off and we're gonna be having to face the same struggle next year? But at that point, the downside is even steeper. And I guess that's thinking about like long-term too, the trajectory we're on, hoping that CBT comes through with some amazing plan that somehow solves this for everyone in our
I
valley.
don't think we should count on that.
But I don't think we should count on that. And so I will say like, that's a very real concern for me when I'm thinking about like. And also, I have a concern as a board member, if we have recommendations coming from IBB teams that don't align with the recommendations that are coming from staff. That's gonna be a really tough position for our board to be in. And so I just wanted to kind of name that.
So
we will
your, I
have to
guess I
have
was,
an
so
alignment.
your recommendation is we don't do PPOA.
I mean,
Your recommendation is we should do the HGH.
I'll say, I don't think that's the recommendation, but I gathered the same thing that you gathered from all the documentation, that the HDHP. We're even, we're good, we don't have to come up with more cuts. If we go beyond it, we're back into cutting mode.
But we might have to come up with finding more staff, because staff might, like, I think that's a big, like, I get like in theory choosing like it is, like, we're asking for this like thing, but I think. I just had dinner with a new teacher last night, and she talked about how she's like barely making it. You know, we were to increase and we had to ask them to pay $25 a month, I don't know if she'd be able to do that, and she would have to leave. And so I think, at the same time, she also doesn't, she's cash poor, it's not like she can like go ahead and be like, hey. I have strep throat, I'm not gonna pay $750 to go to the doctor and get my antibiotics, and so like, even though like they seem like we can't have both, like I feel like this is a. Like a crucial thing that like we need to really try to find the money, because I think it's like critical that our staff. Like, I think it's one thing I really admire about being on this committee always, we've always tried to have a pre-plan. Specifically for our classified staff, because it really is an expense. And to not be able to have that, and then also ask our staff to now have to pay hundreds of dollars for even to go to the doctor. And to see that in the end is gonna involve people just leaving the district.
Well, did we, so I thought at the first meeting, we said for certified staff, that was the key, but I thought I remember classified. You guys saying that your staff, it wasn't as important to have 100% for the employee. And so that was kind of the other thing that I don't think we ever revisited it, but when.
We talked about it last week.
Okay, I
Yeah.
missed it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, sorry.
They don't wanna lose their jobs.
Right.
Job security.
Their
was
job,
higher.
Was the
job
higher.
security was the
Yeah.
higher. But it was to me, it became an ethical. I just happened to look at what a doctor visit looks like. I just got charged for it in December. And if you're gonna add all the things that you add, it's gonna be about $750. So if your kid's got strep. And you're cash poor, which most people are.
Yeah.
They're not gonna go to the doctor.
Right.
Well, and then the certified IBB, one of our subcommittees, is less disruption to the classroom because the teachers being out. If we're sick and we can't go to the doctor and get mad if we're just staying home, you're gonna have more disruption to the classroom.
I know that it's not always these choices, but is PPO 8 more important than a COLA or a step? Cause I mean, that's one way to pay for it.
Yep.
And that 1.2 is what it costs to give everybody a step or a COLA.
Well, and I think, yeah, I brought that up last time, and I think you ran the numbers right, Anna, it was like. I mean, to me, it seems like that's amazing, we're going for both.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what is more important? For the step or PPO?
A COLA, step for a first year certified teacher will cover their own increase of, 75 a month if we were to pay for HDHP and somebody opted into PPO. Does that make sense? So the raise from a BA teacher to a BA +1 is a couple $100 more than $75 a month. A classified staff member coming in at 20, whatever our lowest, 2018 or something. It doesn't, a 1.8 raise on that.
It's a $653 raise. Over 12 months, it's $54 a paycheck.
Is what that raise is at a 1.8. So it doesn't, it would be.
If you're in the
you
base
could-
of like a front office
Yeah,
person.
it would be less,
Their check would be less than.
would be less to buy into PPO.
Yeah, the ask to don't contribute would be.
Well, I
Well,
think
somebody said that, pay cut, basically would be, I think that would be a pay cut.
To try to hold your
Yeah.
PPOA.
Yeah.
Which if you got it now, you're trying to hold it, and your step is then lost.
And $653 is nothing to kind of go, oh, well, you know,
Right.
but a $54, I can see $54 a month. It could just disappear. And if you had PPO 8 instead of the other one, it seems like it would be you would be better off.
You're better covered.
But, yeah, yes, but a 1.8 step is not even a cost of living increase. A cost of living is at least a 2.3.
But we get, but it's 1.8.
I know,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what our step is,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're not even,
I see what
We're
you're
our
I
step
don't think we
isn't-
can call it a cost of living,
Yeah,
we
it
can call
doesn't
it a
match
step,
inflation.
but we can call it, we can't call it cost of living, because we're already not getting a cost of living increase, so that's already impactful on budgets and checkbooks.
I think the conversation about like step freezes and COLA, at least for the certified staff, this conversation makes more sense in our IBB group that's dealing with finances, and I think that's an idea that we could explore through that group. Just off the top of my head, like I wanna talk to teachers and I wanna like do some math and like really play around with like what is the actual like benefit cost analysis if we don't have it, like what versus we do have to, but you don't buy in, like I want more data on that. I want teachers to buy in, but I also don't think that this group should be looking at the salary schedule. I don't think that it's our place, considering that there's the IBB group, the certified group that's looking at salary schedules.
Is there a similar group for classified doing salary schedule?
I mean, no, because there's not really, I would say admin's a no, because we didn't find more money to.
There's no money to look at, so we don't, we're gonna look at our budgets, we're gonna take the time to look at our budgets. See what we can cut, what we can do within our own school budget.
And the classified salary team is working on other, like, has worked on a what we call it, it's like a plan for how we would do comps for a very first, like we said, we're developing a system that would have like a 5-year rotation of focusing on certain employee groups and then working conditions and schedules and contracts. So that salary team is working on something different and also not working.
And the difference between certified and classified is a beginning teacher, you know, whatever that BA1 or whatever. That's already $20,000 more than a classified person gets, you know, so it's hard.
Yeah, it's different.
It's hard to compare because it's such a different baseline and a different situation.
Your cost analysis is gonna look a little different than our cost analysis.
Exactly.
This brings me back to where we started.
Thank you.
Which is where we're gonna find. Yeah, right.
What,
To be able to recommend the.
okay,
POA.
really quick, let's just make sure we're all aligned here. Look at the bottom of page 1, clarity from the team from 1/28/25. You see these bullet points, let's read them over. Do we still feel like, as a health insurance advisory team, this is our clarity, this is our recommendation. We understand that right now that 600,000 is not there. But, does that still feel right for this team? The how is a different question. But is that, is that the recommendation? Because again, I guess I would, to your point, Heather, and I am grappling with, the how and who that belongs to and where that's appropriate and worth people's time. And so I do think that our representative leadership is gonna be very critical to the how now and in the future with all of these adjustments we have to make. So I don't like, but in terms of the what, is that this is where that team is, and I totally agree with you, Catherine, that like, if we can't figure out the how, and what comes to the board is the health insurance advisory team made up of our 3 IBBs had consensus, this is the recommendation, we can't get there. And so what you're seeing from, the budget the superintendent's bringing forth is this is worst case scenario, it's running a worst case scenario, is not in alignment with the recommendation. I mean, that's what we would be naming, if we can't figure out the how, and nothing changes, that's where this would sit, is, our job is to make a recommendation, this is our recommendation.
Can I ask about the 4th bullet? I read that, if additional money beyond that, go to salary increases. And then it needs some clarification. When I read it this way, I read it that we're thinking the PPOA, but then that 4th bullet reads, and if there's money left over, we'll look at salary increases.
That's exactly what.
And I'm just wondering that's how certified is looking at that.
I think that's how I was understanding it. That if there's
Because that
actually,
means that then there might not be a COLA.
That means that health
Right.
insurance is a
Okay.
priority over.
yes,
Okay.
Well, no, I don't think we're ready to say health insurance is a priority over a COLA. I think we said we need to take that back to our subcommittee and possibly certifying teachers before we say that.
yeah. And in our, no, you're,
For other
and our-
NIV groups, is that true?
Well, I thought that's why we took a pause last time. And
So-
decided to sleep on it, as we put it, because that's what I was trying to say last time, why are we fighting for both? In my opinion, right? Because it was like, what I hear from classified is, a step is amazing, absolutely. But when you break it down to $50 to $100 a month versus a high deductible plan where you're having to, fork out money every time we go, I would rather fight for a PPO 8 and have a freeze. And then everybody's like, no, it's the same thing, it doesn't,
So for
but it's not.
classified, you
but
think
for
it's
us.
health insurance before step or
I do.
COLA for admin?
I do you ladies, do you agree with me on it?
And I think what we were saying is, that's not, tell me if I'm capturing this correctly. We're not looking at the salary schedule for additional funding going into the admin salary schedule at all. So like,
We just
Yeah.
redid it for the first time. And there was no salary schedule when I came in as an assistant this fall. I had negotiated my salary, so when Nikki came, we got one. And then for the first time ever, we got to do that last year. And so that's not really in our history, to be frankly honest with you.
Yeah. Okay.
So you guys don't have steps every year like we do?
We do, but we didn't have, to redo the salary schedule,
Right.
we've only done it once since the inception of the actual salary schedule that Nikki was.
Okay, so
For
I hear,
administrators.
I heard you're not looking at putting new money in, but are you looking at still getting your step for next year? Are you guys holding, are you guys? okay with that?
I've heard from my people, PPO8 is what they want.
hold.
To
Okay.
cover that over. Step or COLA.
And I think one of the concerns last time was then, if I remember correctly, well, yeah, it was, when I had mentioned that, it was like, well, then in the following year, we have to make up 2 steps or 2, and it was,
Right, at some
Right?
point, the freeze will have to.
I feel like that was one of Megan's concerns when I brought it up last time. She was like, well, if we're looking at either a freeze and a PPO8, one or the other, then in the following school year, we still have to make up another step.
Which I
And
think,
that's,
again, highlights my concern about going with a more expensive plan now, because that is gonna be an even greater increase in
Exactly.
year 2, when we're also trying to make up steps.
agreed.
And so I just don't want us to put ourselves in an untenable position in like years 2, 3, and 4. Where we're having to make some really, really tough decisions.
It sounds like this question about, but the other thing that I remember y'all from process was, and maybe we feel confident enough in the recommendation, but was that we would take our recommendation and make sure you all went back to your IBB teams and said, are you comfortable with this being a recommendation? And I don't know that that's all happened yet, and so I wonder if we need to say, this is our draft recommendation. We have this question of, is the step lane COLA more important than, like, is it better to hold that and drive PPO eight as a how question. Like, I wonder if we wanna just say, hey, I'm starting a list at the bottom, it's like, to be discussed with our classified, certified admin IBB teams, that maybe that's a question that folks want to discuss as well as. Or do we feel like that clarity from the team is pretty good to go?
I almost think it's more than just clarity from teams. I think it's, at least for teachers, it's surveying our staff. That would be a big decision to make. And even though we're representative, I don't feel like we can make it without surveying all
We
teachers.
surveyed the teachers, it was back in months ago, and so I just sort of, we've learned a lot more information, and so things have just changed, and I would not feel comfortable. I feel like I wouldn't do a good job representing, because I don't have enough on that, but we could easily survey our teachers.
But
Does it have to be both? If the classified people said, we don't want a cost of living increase, we'd rather have PPO eight. But the certified people still have a step, that's not very equitable, but I
We
mean.
can do that, payroll wise,
Yeah.
Doable, but payroll, not equivalent.
It would be hard,
Process, yeah.
it would be hard. Because I think we could say that would be the choice, don't you think, for classified people, they want their job, but it's more important than the salary increase.
and I think that we've, like, the current plan for 25-26 allows us to save our job, like, that's an assumption too, right? We prioritize not changing staffing allocations, unless it's secondary to loss of students, which is what we always do. Does that make sense? So we kind of made that decision, unless there were those specific positions that have already been reduced, eliminated, not staffed. You know, there have been those. So we did that was that, you know, there's all these unwritten assumptions in that 25-26 plan, and that's one of them, that we didn't say, hey, we're cutting paras by 50%. That wasn't an option, you know, and we did make the assumption that a COLA step or lane was more important than maintaining the current plan, the health plan, but I think we need to tangle with that. Can I ask another question about the 600,000? If we, did like, hey, let's brainstorm more ideas, no food for adults, whatever else we can figure out, and we only got to 300. What do we do with that? If the point was, we're looking, like, I'm just trying to think of how we plan this for staff, like, the point of this brainstorm, the point of this Google form, the point of all these conversations is to unturn stones that we haven't unturned. That, you know, the optics of the teams that worked on the 25, 26, 24, 25 reductions might have missed stuff. And the purpose of us doing this is because right now our priority for staff is to get to a PPO. So we're looking for solutions that can get us there. If we only get halfway there, then does that become like, well, cut the, like, is the way to address that then, I'm just running some fake numbers. If you had an HDHP and you wanted to buy into PPO8 right now, we know that's $75 a month. So if we were able to get 300, do we then say, okay, great, that's only 35 a month? Is that what we would do if we don't get there, or like if we can shake up savings, or if we can get savings, but they don't get us all the way there, is that the best way to use it, is make it shorter pathway to PPO? Do you know what I'm saying? To make it like, doesn't cost so much. I mean, that
Just would want another cost analysis, like maybe it is like, you were saying $54 a month, maybe, but I need the math in front of me to be able to say that, like, I wanna know. Is this truly gonna be net neutral, or is it gonna be a pay cut? That would be my response, and I just would, we'd have to do some math on
I mean, I think, let's just roll with here, if Nancy's
If it
right,
is
and our
54.
lowest paid employees, it would be, you know, it would have to be under 54 a month for it to be a wash. Where they would see no increase in salary and no decrease because of staying, like, whatever additional they earned would be gone in PPO. It have to be under 54 a month, is that right?
for that group.
For that group, yeah, and then we assume for everybody else it works.
And like the other one that I did was a bus driver that had been here 13 years. I didn't start at the base. And their increase would have been $809. So they would get a little bit more in a monthly paycheck than a brand new step one front office specialist. So it would, there's some variation depending on all those starting salaries, how long you've been here.
But that's before taxes.
Just
Sure, so
So we might need to, like you said, Nina, maybe.
I think you.
double
Yeah,
check
I think we'd have to do
numbers.
all, and
So can I just offer,
Yeah.
I think for me, especially since I'm part of finance committee and part of a lot of the conversations around the budget. I'm kind of wondering what the timeline is here. I think that it's February 11th. And so I just wanna know, like, when we, I'm all for us surveying teachers, I'm all for us getting everyone to come back to this meeting and say, yes, go ahead. I guess I'm just wondering, like, what is the expectation on the timeline? Because the board also has to make decisions. We also have to have conversations, we also have to have meetings. So I just wanna know, like, is there an expectation on when the deadline is for us to come to this conclusion?
Yeah, Begonia, help me work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For open enrollment, I will have to give CBT a definite answer. Early April.
Yeah, and that aligns with the timeline we have.
Yeah.
About like March.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what gets.
does that help?
What's so hard about this is like the state won't pass the legislation won't pass their budget until sometimes May. And there's a big difference if Polis gets like, I mean, what's very concerning right now is like their Polis's projection caps the cost of living adjustment at like 23%. Right now, we're getting like a 35% adjustment. If that 23% goes through, we've lost another 500,000 over what we're projecting. So just that little thing, that cost of living adjustment means what we thought we had solved, boom, it's gone, like $500,000 short now. We're not gonna know that until that budget passes at the state level, so.
But could we still give an answer to CEPT and say, okay, we wanna pick the HD plan, the PPO 8, PPO 7. That doesn't mean that we know individually what your district will do, but we can select the plans.
Well, we can totally select the
So you
plan.
can answer to CEPT and buy some time or no?
Well, what's hard is that,
No, because by that point, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, we pick the plans and then all the employees have to go in and pick what you're gonna choose.
By when?
That's usually.
By late April.
So that's much more time than
Yeah, earlier.
Oh, yeah.
February, when you have to tell like, we pick the plans and not yet know how we're going to pay for those plans. And buy
Because we
some
could
time
probably say right
on the
now,
budget.
push back on this, HDHP, PPO 7, PPO 8. Yeah, there it is, like that, and that buys us 2 more weeks in April to figure out the money. Which might really matter, it really matter.
Can I just,
Yeah,
my other concern with the finding money thing is the sustainability, same thing year over year.
Yeah.
Like, this has to be a recurring stream of funding that can support health insurance beyond next year. So if we're asking people for creative ideas, it's like, you need to be able to give this up forever.
yeah.
Because like, we don't see any projections that school finance is gonna change in the next handful of years. Our enrollment, we're a declining enrollment district, we're not gonna get a bump from that, like, I guess I just really wanna ground us in reality and like be really honest with people too when we go out to staff. Letting them know that, yes, you have these ideas, great. But it needs to be something you're willing to part with in the long term. Yeah, the long term really has me, if you couldn't tell.
Well, I know
Has me
when I
concerned.
went through this last time, Megan Talbot talks a lot about like really making some hard cuts and looking at things and having those. So I would also ask us to kind of look backwards on how those conversations happened before to see how we can kind of use them to apply moving forward. And I know that we have that, at least certified IBB, like that's that subcommittee. I was under the impression was to go through. And it's part of that conversation. Maybe I've misunderstood what that subcommittee's goal was, because I guess I thought this conversation we're having right here. Around like where the money's coming from was gonna be that subcommittee. Is that, am I wrong with
I
that?
think we're misaligned on that.
Okay, okay.
Because my understanding of that committee is to develop a competitive, right, we renamed, the shared interest was competitive salary and benefit package.
Okay.
I think a working group to look at cuts and analyze is not that committee. I think it's gonna need to be,
You want it to be this committee?
I mean, I think it's gonna need, I think there's all sorts of cuts, like.
Well,
school
I
leaders
can
need
be said that I just,
discretionary out of it.
when Megan said
Maybe-
like a month ago, Megan said that. Shannon met with all these groups and they all worked through the cuts. That's not actually how it happened, because I went back to Craig. I said, I don't remember a meeting, do you? Other than we were brought in and athletics got ripped. I didn't have a choice. It was, this is what's happening. We didn't have choices back then. We just didn't have choices. Maintenance, we've not ever come back to where we were with athletics, and we never got back custodial. I mean, maintenance, custodial, athletics, all that extra was just slashed. I don't remember, any of us remember having a conversation about what we could cut. We were told this is what we're cutting.
Okay.
And then we never brought those custodians back like in my building and things like that. So, they were cut. So there wasn't discussions. We were told what was cut. That's how I went back and asked Craig, like, am I crazy? He's like, nope, that's how it happened. So there wasn't a conversation.
And I do appreciate that, a lot of you guys have served this committee or other committees for a long time, and there's a history that is always present in these committees, because I think that's important for the district, and we recognize it as board members too, when things have happened, transitions happen. I think it's important, and I know we've shared this with our superintendent, is that it's important for this committee and every committee to know that the board has been very adamant that we don't want anything that affects students to be cut. That's like the line. So I feel like that's really important, that like, if we need to say it again, however many times, like that is our line, that is a hard line for the board. And I also think like, we're working in a very different time. I was just in Washington for NSBA. We have historically gone or have tried to engage more with CASB, with NSBA to say, like, how can we advocate? We advocated with our Congressman Hurd to talk about insurance, what is happening here. I, as a board member, and I've shared this with my colleagues, with their superintendent, I think our budgeting is gonna be very tight, like tighter than ever before moving forward. And I just say that as a board member who, was there hoping that I would leave like feeling better. That was not the vibe at all leaving. And I just think it's important for us as a board and for the superintendent and for our CFO to like understand that we might have to get to a place where cuts are made that we are not all happy with. But also, like, as much as we can, like, safeguard students, like, that is the commitment from the board. And so I as a board member just want to make sure that, like, yes, I want us to have collaboration, I want us to have conversation, I want us to have surveys, I want us to be able to say, like, this is what staff is sharing with us, this is what we're hearing. And also, like, this is the reality, right, of where we're at and what the future for not just our school district, but for the entire state and possibly for the country looks like, and what school funding will look like in the next, I don't know, even like 6 months, it could look so different. And so I just want to make sure that when we're thinking of what we're going to choose, that we're considering that yes, things were at a time, maybe a couple years back even, very different. But school funding might look drastically different a year from now. And that is kind of scary for us as a board when we're trying to figure out, like, how can we keep staff? Because that's important. We know that. We need staff. We cannot have a school district without staff? And also like, how do we keep our schools open? Like, we have to figure this out together.
Yeah, I guess I just wanna name that, like, one of my biggest, or one of my favorite quotes is like, when we advocate for teachers, we're not advocating against students. Like, they go hand in hand. And I think so many times there's this viewpoint of like, it's teachers or students, and like, it's not, it's like a together thing. So I just hope that we remember that like, when we're advocating for teachers, we are in ultimately advocating for our students.
And where admin IBB came in a month ago, 6 weeks ago. However long we've been doing this. Months. Is that we really came in at what our employees need and want. That's why it's really hard to say it's not where we are. It's gonna be, will teachers come back? Because if not, then it directly affects kids.
Well, and thank you for that.
And the same thing with classified to run the buildings. And the buses and everything else.
But yeah, I mean, I echo Autumn. Like, when we sit in here, we're always talking students first, and we're talking about, you know, we're in a massive teacher crisis that are bigger than we have ever been, and we have districts around us that can provide things that we haven't ever provided, and are certainly not gonna provide now. And if we cut more, how many more teachers are we losing? Because they can just suck them up real quick right now. I have kids who can't get to school on time because we don't have enough bus drivers, so that impacts them. So we are fighting to keep employees in this district so we can provide the best education and not wear out the teachers, the bus drivers, the janitors, the cafeteria ladies, to the point that they're like, forget it. I mean, I literally have teachers in my building like, forget it. I can go work at Wendy's, make more, take home less stress, and be done at 5 o'clock when my day is done. So we're fighting to keep these highly qualified individuals driving the buses on a snowy day, fixing more meals on a Friday so that kids have something in their bellies for the whole weekend. And for teachers to be in those classrooms, giving the best quality education and closing those gaps. So this whole argument, this whole discussion is about how are we keeping employees in the district? How we keep a superintendent from leaving the year and putting us in a crisis, all of those things. So it's always about the kids first.
Can I just ask as a follow-up for that, what are other school districts providing them in our valley that we are not?
Well, I mean, even if it's specific to health, right, like that's pertinent to this discussion, this group. Like, if we don't have that information, that seems like a critical piece of information that we need.
Yeah, they have their, probably they tell us.
I mean, we can text board, they'd all tell us.
I mean, I think we can also look at their websites, look at benefits packages. I think we could. Or, you know, to find out what they're offering. Yeah, absolutely. I think we can find out, to know what we're competitively up against. Sure, you know, we can look at that.
When I think it's different for like each group of staff. I can tell you from research I've already done, like what RE2 is offering ECE. And they don't even get healthcare. So they keep them at 20 something hours a week because they have Fridays off, obviously. So from my understanding is only directors get full-time benefits, which includes health. So RE2, as far as ECE staff, are not even offered
Well,
healthcare.
I think that was across board when we went to a 4-day week, that was when we cut. It was all of classified, it was bus drivers, custodians, everything, so it's down to 4 days a week, that's how they cut.
I'm sorry, yeah, can you, I didn't catch what that.
In 2008, when we had to cut the budgets. RE2 went to 4 days, and then it helped tremendously because they took out classified. They took out a lot of that stuff, they saved a tremendous amount there. Just from the 4 days, they didn't have to have a full day, 40 hours. It was 40 hours. Was how they saved them.
So it sounds like our recommendation right now is pretty solid. Okay, we don't have we're not clear on the how. Does that sound right?
I think part of the how is gonna be like, maybe we need to kick it back to some of these groups. I'd really like to look at some of the how with our finance group and our IBB. And like, that could include like, what would lane change salary
What's more
percentage?
important?
What's more important? It could look like, other ideas that we had, that we brought up last week. And maybe we all kind of. I said this last week at our Thursday meeting, and Christy, I wish she was here because I want to tell her again, like. You guys have done a tremendous amount of work just to get us to the. Like, you and Christy have worked, and we know Christy's worked overtime trying to get us just to this HD plan, which is great. We're feeling good. I think it needs to get kicked back to some of these groups and find some more money in other places and say, what are we willing to compromise on? I don't want to compromise anything, like you said, Jasmine, on anything student facing. But are there things that we can look at? What are other places in the district where money is sitting? And can we find the $600,000? And I think that needs to go back to the IBB group, I mean, specifically the certified, but I also think it would be worth it for classified, certified admin, to bring their ideas as well, and where some more cuts could come from. And I think like to Kevin's point, like, not just cuts, we're cutting it this year, but it's what can you live without? It has to be sustainable. And if we can't find anything that's sustainable, then we need to start looking at other options. But I don't think that the how is gonna be answered in this committee. I think the how needs to get kicked back to our finance.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanna name that question, I think that I see a lot of merit in going back and talking to employees and having conversations around ideas. And crowdsourcing ideas. I'm really reluctant to put the nexus of the decision making with any committee. I feel like that's ultimately a deciding factor on admin. I think it has to be incredibly discussed. But, you know, before we adjust or someone says change the 18.35 to 1 ratio, I wanna have a deep dive with school leaders. I wanna have a deep dive with teachers on that. I don't want classified coming at us and saying, we decided, we found it, move that to 19 to 1, and you say, all right. I don't think that is the right problem for anyone. So but I also wanna hear from folks. And so I do think that it's like, I would like this how to be a district-wide process of brainstorming that I think that we are gonna need everybody's ideas for the next 10 years. I do, and I feel some urgency, so I think that this could be an interesting pilot project to be like, let's put this question out to everybody and see what we have. And see what we learn from everybody brainstorming. I do think that there can be some urgency around it to say, can we as a team get to enough ideas that gets us to 600, to gets us to PPOA? And so
Hasn't a lot of that work been done already? I mean, it would have to be like that's what we've been doing for the last 5 months. And that's what Christine's been doing with
I would say
leaders for the last 5 months,
the
so,
district office,
okay,
not like school.
We haven't done it.
but schools haven't done it,
We have,
Okay.
again, because of the priorities to not
right,
like
not impact
mess
school
with
budgets.
staffing. We haven't pushed on, you know, looking at, say, the discretionary budgets for schools on,
Yeah,
you know, I would, and I also would say that we were biased in trying to make decisions at the hundreds of thousands of levels. We weren't, I mean, there are a couple little like
yeah.
10 grand savings, but if we're trying to get 600,000 is different than 8 million.
No.
And so I do think at this point, maybe it is more reasonable to look at the 10,000, 50,000.
That's just boundary too.
It's a, oh, and I'm looking at county now. Got into a numbers game. We don't have looking at tables and charts because I got excited. This is not like exhaustive at all, but it's just interesting. RE2 when I looked, it would be worth like looking at some other websites to see. And it looks like an RE2 from what I could see for the 24-25 school year. Everyone pays in.
The minimum is like
The minimum is $94
for an employee.
for an employee for an HDHP four. The employee pays $94. Again, this
That
is
goes
last
up.
year, but I don't know what's for next year, but I just was curious. So I wanted to know.
The Aspen board president told me she thought they were doing an Aspen also, but she didn't confirm it. I tried to text her and see if she could confirm.
It does say they do CEBT, so I was curious how much that cost is going on next year for everything and for all the plans, like. This has got PPO 8, the employee pays $109 and the employer pays $692. But the total cost of $800 a month.
We're way above that. It's- Right now it's costing us about 800 on opioid. But I do know that, they're going, well, we know that they're going at least 16% high, 16.5% higher, because that's the low end of the range. And I know that Aspen, just because Barron's more open about it, they're at the 22. I know that Aspen's seen it. That's super interesting. Okay, what if we do this, and then figure out some timelines? So what if, we use this moment for some crowdsourcing ideas? Cause I, two things. One, I would love to hear all the ideas that folks are seeing that we missed. And I think a 600,000 target feels more different. Like, again, we weren't really entertaining $5,000 and $10,000 savings to try to get to 8 million. We just don't have the bandwidth. I think this is a different number. And I think we could, what I could communicate in like next Tuesday's email or sooner if I can get it organized, is, hey, the health insurance committee is pretty damn aligned that PPO8, sticking with PPO8 as a key baseline employee plan is the best for our staff. Because we already know it's gonna cost more for families and spouses, and this is really important. We recognize it's gonna cost an extra 600,000. We see that the, in the budget summit, that the current admin wasn't able to find an additional 600,000. We could use your help. Would love to hear your ideas of recommendations of savings, ideally things that would be long-term, but definitely for a year, and ideally things that could just become practice. So share your ideas here, talk to, your, potentially depending on the meetings that are coming up, maybe that can be discussions held at IBB meetings as well, if there are groups that feel like we could come up with a collective idea. But share input on this form, and then I wonder, with the target to health insurance, whether then, that can be something that, like, accountability wise, I can then report back, and I would wanna have some urgency because we need to kind of move. So I would say this is open for 2 weeks, like, get your ideas in, meet with your people, let's see, we really need to see what we can do in 2 weeks. Because stuff like food for staff is gonna require an additional set of information. Like, okay, that's an interesting idea, what would everybody save? Or I think to your point, Gayla, we cut that, and now your rentals had to make up your let's just say you said, well, we spent $5,000, we use our rental, and we said, okay, well, we're gonna cut 5,000 from your discretionary, you're gonna need to move your rental. Does that make sense?
Just use the rental for something.
To pay something else because we're cutting food for adults. So that's gonna take some clarity before I think what we try to do is have a month of 2 weeks of crowdsourcing, 2 weeks of analysis to bring this team back together. Because then what could happen is in the meantime, all of our employee leadership groups could then be asking that question, like, hey, the Anna Christie team assumed a COLA was more important than PPO8. Do we agree with that? Or do we feel differently? That seems like a critical question. And then I also think I would like us to pressure test this question on if we can't find the full 600,000. Here's my question. Let's say we can shake the trees and find 300. Is it better to say everybody's doing PPO8, we're all paying $40 a month to do it, go an RE2 route? Or is it better to say we're going HDHP and the cost to get to PPO8 is not 75, it's 40? Does that make sense? That seems like a nuanced question, but if you can't get there, which is better? That we assume everybody wants PPO8? And I don't know, it's not an ideal question, but I guess just be nice to pressure test that. how does that sound? I was throwing out numbers and timelines.
When are we going to get our budgets next week at this point, you think? So,
Okay, you want the survey to go out?
I was thinking, well,
Why don't you say that there's 6 weeks to the first week of April, not counting spring break. So, I just wanna make sure.
I could get, I mean, if I have to cadence to Tuesdays, or I could send something out to everybody at the end of this week. You get a form up, get information, I mean, that's not gonna take long. But to explain it, it'll take a minute for me to get it posted. So what if we run 2 weeks of that thing being open, takes us to the end of February, that gives us to mid-March to do some analysis on that, which means the week of the 17th, we could come back together to see where we're at, this team. And say, whoa, yeah, we have some great ideas, we think we're there, or we're at 400,000, where do we put it?
Wondering too, if we could ask, at least for a classmate, we could, like in the past, we've done like, hey, can you take 5 minutes in the ERW? Have all of your staff answer the survey right now, like just something like that, just to try to increase that feedback. Because it could keep it quick.
Yeah, I wonder if we leave that to all of you to figure out the right way to get that answer, whether it's a survey, whether it's talking to folks, whether you feel like you already have the answer. I think I worry about surveys being effective always with classified, but, I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
So you'll put it out at the end of this week or next Tuesday?
I mean, more important, I worry about just inundating. We'll start to tune out. I mean, I can get it done by Friday, get it out to everybody.
I don't think I have a preference.
You know,
I think you have,
Okay.
I'm hitting a Tuesday cadence, I'm okay with that, as
Okay.
long as that's okay with our timeline. And then we can talk about ERWs on either the 19th or the 26th. I think it would still be the 2 ERWs that we would wanna aim for.
Does it sound okay? I want to appropriately reflect this team's priorities. So is it fair to say the health insurance committee recommends that we find the funding to provide PPOA plan for all staff and cover it 100%. This means something like this means we need to identify $600,000 of additional funding reductions, cuts, something like that. Need your help. How? Stop feeling. Thing like share your ideas here. All right. I will probably put just having looked at the anonymous Google form for my evaluation, something about our norms in there, a little nudge, especially since this is all of our, it's one thing when it just goes out to families, but for our staff, I might put a little like reminder of our policies on professionalism and norms. Sorry, okay. Yeah, push back on that, but, and then I might say, to be honest, like, you tell me like, I think anonymity can be helpful. I also think if this is a super specific, this committee, like I also, if somebody has a savings knows what they're talking about, sometimes it might be helpful to have a meeting. Should we just make that optional?
Yes.
Maybe share your name and we can follow up with you or something like that. And then what I can do is because my, right, there needs to be closed loop, so something you guys push back on if this makes sense. I would then, 2 weeks from now, when we close it, I would summarize the feedback, summarize the data, try to filter out what I feel like are ideas that are worth exploring, and can be analyzed, and then I can tag the right teams for that work. I mean, that may be something that comes up where it's, wow, this is really I'm thinking of after the IBB summit, and one of our reps came up and talked about uniforms and savings that could be made there, so maybe that's like, oh, let's go talk to this team and see about what might be able to happen there, what might be possible with the school year. Does that make sense? That then it becomes 2 weeks of kind of like dealing a deck of like, hey, can your team think about this? This is an idea. And if you think it would work, let us know some sort of a commitment, then I can come back, like I can report on that to all staff. Here's some great ideas that we're gonna follow up on. And then we could all come back, this team, in 2 weeks from that analysis, and I can say, here's what we've been able to affirm. And we can all go from there. And we've gotten a little more information about, you know, if we were at a place where we're like, all we were able to cut is $25,000. Is a COLA more important? Hopefully we can have an answer there. And maybe if we get to that partial question, like, okay, we got 400,000, what's more important? To force everybody to contribute to PPO8 or have a cheaper jump to PPO8? Does that sound right?
And Anna, can I just ask that we also, or next time this group meets, that there's also more research done on what neighboring districts provide, please?
Yeah, that's, I like that. Okay, so next steps,
And I just text my friend. But she's a certified teacher.
They do not, they do not, she had, yeah.
okay, so next steps, I'm gonna open the crowdsourced survey. IBB reps are gonna talk to your teams about the COLA versus PPO8 and partial funding options. Someone is going to, run
Anna, can
some
I ask a question?
comps on.
Just for timeline wise, I don't know if it's feasible, but I feel like the discussion with the subcommittees are whether the step or PPOA is more important, right? And I kind of feel like the how of that is tricky, but only if PPO.
If we have to do PPO.
Yeah, so part of me feels like timeline wise, would it be like instead of opening up this whole, how do we figure out this extra 600,000, which we may not need to cover if people are willing to not take a step? Does that make sense? Like, I feel like we're doubling up.
I mean, you know what, I think that's a good point,
I don't know.
I would say in some respects, what this is this is an option. It's one of like, it's almost, it's an idea that could come up just like no food. It would say, do you know what I mean? I think it's a potential solve. And we're actually jumping a little bit ahead of the analysis to say, is that really what people would want? Yeah.
I just felt like it.
Yeah.
It felt like an act.
It might be getting a little bit ahead of that.
Well, and you have that information, but they don't have any of that information, so they would need to get it, and if they said no, PPO8 said, then we'd have to go to the next step.
Well, and I agree with that, but I was like, if we're trying to push both of this out, like we're trying to get the feedback of whether the COLA or the PPOA is where it's at, we may not need to go to the next thing, cause if even certified agreed that like they'd be willing to take a freeze and get PPO8, then the budget's already covered, right? Cause then we
that's
wouldn't
true.
have that
That's
2
true.
point something million to give a step increase for everybody. Am I understanding that right?
You totally are. In fact, actually, then you're 600,000 with the positive.
Way above that, then we've got 2 point something million versus, I mean,
Well,
ish.
it's 1.2 to get everybody's COLA steps and lanes. And so if we froze that and reallocated it to the 600,000, so we still, then we would come out 600,000 to the positive.
So I was just
maybe we could do
wondering,
like
do we
half.
still jump ahead to the how?
Yeah,
If it comes back that certain teams feel like they'd be happier with a PPO8 versus a step.
Well, certified, do you, like, do you feel like you could weigh in on the likelihood of that?
No.
No.
I don't think the math, I can't imagine a world in which, here's why we biased and said the COLA. Or the step is more important, and I would say the reason was, and this is completely biased to certified. But it's all based on a COLA gets you more money. In the certified salary schedule than the cost of buying into PPO8. That makes sense? Yeah. Right,
And it's
so,
a retirement.
so, right, and so certified loses money from that, and so that's why I feel like it's not as easy for, I have a hard time seeing a world in which somebody looks at that certified salary schedule and says, I'd rather not get my COLA and save the $800 I have to pay at PPO. Does that make sense? Because the COLA for certified, the smallest jump is, I think, like 1180.
And
That's
I
what I'm
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I would totally go with your plan, but because our time is so
So
short,
short,
I say we hit them with both of them, and then
sounds
if
good.
we don't need it, we just put it away, but if we do, we don't have
Right.
to rush to try.
Sounds good.
yeah.
I know, I was just like, for our sake too, it's like,
Yeah,
now
no,
we've
well,
got.
I hear you, Stacy, I hear ya. Okay, in terms of the comps on neighboring districts and health insurance contributions,
Can we also get there's like salaries at different levels for different subgroups too? Because I think that we're talking, like Heather brought over, like we're talking about a package. So yeah, maybe they pay 800
Yeah.
in, but maybe they're $2,000 more a month than we are.
like, it's super helpful what Stacy just said,
Yes.
right, to know that like, wow, we're beating on salary, we're beating on health insurance.
Yeah, it's a
And
whole
with
package.
contract days for rifle, comparing us to rifle, they have less contract.
Yep.
So that's gonna be a lot of math to try to.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked in RE too, and we are on the same schedule. And because she worked less days than I do, she actually made more money than I do. And had enough work to do.
Does she work the same hours?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
she's a
longer,
teacher,
15 minutes.
15 minutes longer, but she had a guaranteed lunch and planning period every day that were longer than ours. So we went down minute to minute.
So they actually work less minutes, not in days.
And days.
They work.
They don't work a
should be
40-hour
working
week.
the same minute. They.
Do they have a 40-hour work week?
I just feel like that's also beyond the scope.
So that would be the
considered for
same.
comparing health
Right,
insurance.
they might work 4 days, but it's still a 40-hour work week.
Yes, that would be more time.
So that's the same. I guess then you can compare on 40-hour work.
When it made sense when I said it, but now you're
Yeah.
saying it makes sense, and I have to look at it to make sure which one actually makes sense.
Got it.
Cause they both make sense in my brain, now I'm like, wait, which one's actually? Okay. So that's a good point.
Yeah, it's gonna take, the comps on neighboring districts and salaries is gonna be a big word. And I understand that it's a lot, there's some alignment because what we're trying to understand, I assume, is whether there's tolerance for asking employees to pay for baseline benefits. That's kind of what we're naming.
I feel like that's the question for this committee. I feel like the larger question of the overall benefits package is not, doesn't belong with this committee, really. And they're talking,
Yeah.
and it's so specific to every single person.
And job and goal and,
I feel like when we're talking about health benefits, we can compare
Health benefits to health benefits.
And, I just wanted to be clear, so this team is sending out a survey to staff for certified? That is gonna be, they're not, okay.
What's gonna happen is, I'm gonna send a survey out to everybody, the entire district to say. Health Insurance Committee has this recommendation to pay 100% of PPO8, but we are 600,000 short for it. We're reaching out to employees to see if there are ideas that folks have to make cuts. That, align to these priorities, that could be recurring. And then I will pull those together, filter through, do some analysis, see if we've got some ideas around that. The other thing is that so I would do that. Our IBB teams will talk, our IBB reps in this room will talk to their teams about this COLA versus PPO8. If we have partial funding, is it better to have HDHB be the base and cheaper than $75 to buy into PPO8? Is that better, or is it better to force everybody into PPO8 and at a cost? Does that make sense? So I think those are options.
Jasmine, Certified is gonna send out a survey with those questions.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so I
so,
just wanna-
but however everybody does it is however they're gonna do it. I imagine y'all are soon talk to people, because it's a small group, I have no idea outside what we're gonna do, but we'll figure it out. And I also think that we may have enough from that survey and the conversations to know, for the most part, how folks will respond to this. Because the way you talked through it, so, but coming back in a month, folks will have a little bit more clarity on that. We will try to get a better understanding, and maybe it will just, maybe I can follow up with Bologna on that maybe there's a way that we can get those kind of neighboring districts understanding where they're landing on contributions. From there, we will come back in a month, and the other thing that might happen in a month is more clarity at the state level, district level, budget level, federal level. Things are gonna continue to come into focus, I think, and what's interesting is I'm hopeful that we've done the $1 million deficits, and now we're talking about the hundreds of thousands of dollar deficits, and if we can make some headway on this, I think that's great. I think that there are bigger questions, and I guess I just wanna name this because I think that this is an emergent, the 600,000 for this year, feel some urgency around how we tackle this. I do think these bigger questions about cuts and staffing and allocations and custodial and coaches and school resource allocation frameworks and the size of the DO, yeah, that is the work for the next 3 to 5 years. And that work is absolutely gonna tap into representative leadership teams. But the when and the how, I don't know. I just don't think that us making recommendations on staffing cuts right now is realistic for our commitment to employees, given the current context. I'm very uncomfortable axing teams. And I guarantee you that anybody who's going through attrition right now is questioning whether they need to staff that. And we're having hard conversations about that. So I guess I see those as slightly different conversations. I'm not sure that all of our IBB processes right now are gonna be able to solve the millions of dollars of things that I think we all feel are coming and are gonna have to be part of looking at our staffing allocations, because we are probably I just think that's the work that we're gonna have. And ideally, I'd love to have it in the next 6 to 8 months, so that when we're doing this next November, December, we have a plan and we know where we can make some adjustments and hopefully address them through attrition. Does that make sense? Shall we calendar? I think what we're now targeting, if we're running this out, that by the week of the 17th, if this team could come back together, I think that would be. I think we have more information. What does that Tuesday, the 18th at 4:30 look like?
So first week. Tuesday. No, it's March. March.
I have it on my calendar already.
Oh, we do?
Oh, no, just kidding, that's a different meeting, but I can move that meeting.
Yeah. So we also say Monday the 17th.
Tuesday 18th, the same group.
March.
March.
Okay, I think I only invite these, so I already
Oh.
sent it.
Okay.
You
just did.
we could carry.
Oh, it's
No,
not.
that's beforehand. Thank you for asking.
I just checked.
I
like,
checked
what-
too.
we got-
Thank you for checking.
Okay,
No.
does everybody feel clear on where we are and what our next steps are? And, okay, I wanna check one more thing. I'm hearing from this team that our recommendation is PPOA 100%. The how, we're all working on. Do we need a consensus? Do you need a pause on that? Do we need to go back to our IBB teams before we agree that that is our recommendation? Or like, can I say that is a recommendation of this team? Are we ready for a thumbs consensus? Or am I conveying that we are leaning that way strongly?
I feel like the one thing we haven't considered, and this may walk us way back, is HDHP with a contribution to an HSA, which is a tax-free contribution from districts and the employee, and if having that cash in an HSA account addresses the concerns of not having cash to pay for appointments, and if we're way beyond that, tell me, but I don't remember ever having that conversation, and I just think that's what goes hand in hand with an HDHP plan, and if that is way outside the scope of what we could possibly do in the next 6 weeks, I get that too, because it seems like this needs a much longer lead up time for a long-term solution.
And I also just feel like a recommendation right now, and we still have so much input to get from all these teams. I don't know, like, I know that that's the consensus, but I do feel like we're gonna have much more conversations on what the final recommendation is gonna be, so I don't know if we can decide on that tonight.
I'm trying to think of the right wording for this survey. Do you want me to say the current thinking is? Like our team is leaning towards? Because you're right, Chapman, like maybe we come back in a month and we say, wow, we got 400 grand, so now our recommendation is PPOA, everybody's paying $25 a month. Right, or that could be the recommendation, so maybe we don't commit to anything, but I just say the current priorities from the team looks like this, we know it's gonna cost more, now we're trying to kind of brainstorm ideas on how we could do this. Does that sound right? So I won't commit us.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, won't commit us. Thank you. I still don't necessarily have somebody responsible for getting comps of neighboring districts and health insurance contributions. B, I'm kind of wondering if your team could work on that.
Yes, we can.
As from an HR lens, okay. And I would say if anybody else has, it sounds like some of them are just on their websites.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can just start even by the benefits plan.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you,
Typically, some of them already too, are right there.
okay. I mean, and I don't think, at least I know, there is no one who's working with CDBT who's gonna get better. It's not gonna get better for any of the CDBT folks in this valley. So basing it on where they are now is great. That's all good. Okay, and we are coming back together, we just said March 18th. We are like 4 minutes before this is supposed to end, so we are absolutely right. Appreciation of y'all. What do you got?
I'll appreciate the brain power in the room, like, it's a lot, right? I love that everybody is conscious of everybody else, so I really appreciate that. This is not easy trying to deal with all the different staffing groups, so just thank you for being conscious of everybody. Position.
I'll appreciate, well, echo that appreciation of just everybody coming to, this meeting and volunteering your time. I know it's, hard to give us time any day of the week, especially evenings. And I also just appreciate the opportunity for there to be conversation on like, how can we be creative around solving these issues, I think we're gonna have to do more of that. And I just really appreciate that, like, there is a commitment to find possibilities, because I do think that's important, so. Thank you all.
I continue to be grateful for like everyone's gift of time and doing this like roll up your sleeves and try to figure this out. I'm just really grateful for that and the willingness to try to solve for this. Support them, so please grab that way out. And we'll reconvene on March 8th. Thanks, everybody.
Thought you were keeping the pulse over there. I heard that.